Open Channel D. Welcome to Cocktails in Waverly's office. I'm Hannah.
I'm Ursa.
And I'm Logan.
Today we're going to be looking at the King of Knaves affair, which is an episode that, upon first glance, seems like it has a pretty sensible and coherent plot. But, much like the Gioco Piano affair, the more you think about it, the less the plot makes sense. So I'm gonna do my best to try to summarize the plot of this episode. So there's a lot of moving parts. It starts with Napoleon and Ilya watching a deal go down. They're watching this gangster named Angel Galley meet with a power plant manager, and they're supposed to be making a deal so that Angel can buy uranium from this power plant manager. But Angel decides instead to knife the power plant manager, and then right after he has killed this man, he tries to run away and is kidnapped instead. And so Napoleon and Ilya go back to headquarters and they try to puzzle out what's going on, and they try to figure out, like, what other possible lead they could have other than Angel, who has now been kidnapped. And it's worth noting that there's no Waverly in this episode, and so they're just, like, hanging out in his office, coming up with a plan, and their plan is terrible. Like, it's truly a very bad plan. Literally, they're like, I don't know, one of the guys mentioned Rome, and, like, a bank account. Maybe we should go to Italy.
Yeah.
And Napoleon is like, and in fact, I think we should take two separate planes.
Yeah.
And it's never explained why they need to take two separate planes.
I swear,
So,
Waverly's the
I'm
only
assuming-
thing holding Uncle together.
Yup. Without Waverly, like, if Napoleon were the one in charge of making all of their spy plans, like, instantaneously they would fall apart as an agency.
But he's next in
So-
line!
Yup! That means everyone else is worse. Actually, unfortunately, I think the real answer to that is that everyone else is a woman.
Yeah!
Because, like, all the lady uncle agents seem relatively, like, competent, but unfortunately it's 1964, so they don't get to be the head of uncle. So it's Napoleon, which is a terrible idea. So, anyway, they go to Italy, and they go through the Italian Del Floria's tailor shop, which looks exactly like the American Del Floria's tailor shop. And when they go to check in with Italian uncle, they have to take on... oh my god, I'm losing the word. When you are another person because you're undercover, like secret
Disguise.
identities.
Yeah.
And Napoleon is hypnotically transformed into Buddington Smith, who is an arms dealer. And
Sorry,
Ilya...
I can't get past that name. Buddington Smith.
It's my very favorite undercover name, like, in the whole series, because it's so fake. Like...
Buddington.
Like, there's no full name version of Bud. Bud is, like, a nickname. It's not, like, a shortening of a real name. Buddington is not a name.
I literally never heard Buddington before, so I was like, my brain was like, is that a real name? Is that where Buddy comes from?
It's not.
Okay.
It'd be like if, he was going as, like, Palson Jones, because someone thought Pal was a real name. Like, so,
How?
Buddington Smith, which is, like, anyone would see through that instantaneously. This is not a real man. And then,
Matesman Smith.
What?
Matesman Smith.
Matesman Smith. Yeah, exactly.
That's the English version.
And Ilya goes undercover as a German scientist named Hugel Strickland, who was somehow sort of disfigured in a radiation accident. But the disfigurement seems to mostly just cause him to walk with a cane. I don't know how radiation would do that to you, but apparently it did to Hugel Strickland. And so the two of them in these undercover personas, which are easily the most complicated undercover personas they have in the whole series, like 90% of the time Napoleon's like, "Hi, I'm Napoleon." So they go to this, like, seedy club in Rome to make contact with an U.N.C.L.E agent who's undercover as a belly dancer. Now, because this episode is just filled with unbelievable names, this U.N.C.L.E agent's name is Venetia, which is to say, basically, she's named after Venice, and they're in Italy. Like,
I think maybe it's. I would assume it's Venetia because, like, the demonym of Venice is Venetian. So
yeah, although in Italian it would be Venezia.
Oh, true.
Venetia is more appropriate because Venetia is completely English thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist in there.
But I wouldn't put it past the uncle being like, screw it, it's just Englishified. It's Ilya anyways.
I think Napoleon actually called her Venetia. I mean, something
okay,
like
that's better.
So, but I mean, it'd be like if you were like, okay, you're gonna meet with the agent who works just outside of New York City, Mr. Hoboken, like, you know, like, it's very weird that she just has the name of a city. So they discover that the owner of this club is Fasik El-Passad, who is a deposed leader of an unnamed Middle Eastern nation. And no one sees to kind of bat an eye over this. Like, they're like, oh, that's mysterious. Okay, let's talk about uranium. And so basically, Buddington Smith makes a lot of noise about, like, how much he'd really like to buy some uranium. And he summons Hugel Strickland over, and they have a very loud conversation about uranium. And a bunch of people in the club turn and kind of watch. And one of the people who turns and watches this conversation is a young woman who is sitting by herself and who's been stood up by some kind of date. And then later on, they're kicked out of the club because Napoleon is being inappropriate, I guess. And when they go back to the hotel, the young woman who was stood up by the date sees that, or not sees, she sneaks into Napoleon's room at night. And she threatens to shoot him, which is really weird to me because we later find out that this woman is a notary. Like, she's not a spy, she's not a criminal. Like, she literally is someone who, like, puts a stamp on papers so that the government knows they're official. And so, like, the fact that she's brought a gun to this situation where, like, her whole purpose in Italy is just to get some guy to sign some papers is bizarre. Yeah. And, like, not only does she try to hold up Napoleon in his room and is like, I'm gonna shoot you if you don't tell me where to find the man who needs to sign these papers, but then, like, he calls her out on it and, like, takes her gun, and she just spends the rest of the scene crying.
Oh yeah, that was so weird.
So, her name is Ernestine, and again, her purpose in being in Italy is that she's trying to help out a young widow who needs some papers signed so she can inherit some money, and so her children won't starve. And then there's a brief aside where Ilya is like, oh, hey, Napoleon, there was a man on your balcony coming to kill you, and I killed him for you, and just, like, threw him off the balcony onto the ground. And this seems like it's gonna lead to something. Like, it seems like somehow this is going to help us figure out the mystery, but not only does it not, but then Ilya just disappears for the next, like, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And
so, I have to confess something. When Ilya was, like, fighting the dude on the balcony, I, for a second, totally brain farted, and I thought it was Napoleon. It was like, even though you could literally hear Napoleon talking inside the apartment, my brain was like, oh, a guy with dark hair, it's Napoleon. Why is he fighting Napoleon? Oh.
I feel like it's important to note that before we started recording, we had a very long conversation about actors who we can't tell apart because they have the same color hair. So clearly the three of us are not very good at actors. Man with dark hair, definitely Napoleon. So Ilya in, like, a lot of these season 1 episodes just kind of, like, will suddenly not be there for part of the episode, and there's never really a good explanation for it. Like, sometimes it's something like, oh, you have to take a separate plane there, and he's like, oh, my plane got delayed. But in this case, he literally leaves the room and just doesn't come back for, like, 30 minutes of the episode. So Napoleon follows Ernestine around, and then the two of them are kidnapped, and they're brought to Fasik el-Passad, the deposed Middle Eastern government leader's spooky castle/prison. And this castle/prison is, it's the same castle that's used every single time they need a castle. Passad is like, you must prove to me that you're Buddington Smith. Go wrestle. And he makes...
And commences some of the most homoerotic wrestling ever.
Yeah, it's real, like, it totally seems like this guy is doing this just because he wants to watch men grapple sweatily with one another. Like, it does not seem like a really good way to test whether or not someone is an arms dealer. Like, I don't know about you, but, like, when I think arms dealer, like, when I run through a checklist in my head of, like, what is an arms dealer likely to be good at, wrestling is not actually on my list.
Okay, actually, I got to say that, Fasik just kidnaps random people and makes them serve in his army. And so, I think it was more like trying to see if Paddington Smith can actually fight, and he absolutely cannot.
Yeah, Napoleon totally, like, whiffs in this wrestling match, and it's weird, because Passad does, he has, like, all these people in his castle that he has, in fact, kidnapped, and he's like, oh yeah, this is my army. And, I mean, the best way everyone knows to form an army is to kidnap people who don't want to be part of your political movement and make them fight for you, right?
I mean, it actually happens in real life, so it makes sense.
But I don't think that's the best way to have good, like, morale among your soldiers.
No,
also, I feel like it's...
Absolutely no, but it happens in real life when people kidnap people in order to work for them or, like, fight for them. It's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. I think the thing that's weird is that it seems like Passad's kidnappings they're really random.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't seem like he's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna kidnap the people who are best at guns. He's like, I'm gonna kidnap a gangster. And, Buddington Smith. And a notary. So... they're at his castle, his spooky castle prison, there's some weird wrestling, and then there's a really, really, really long sequence where Passad basically is like, mwahahaha, Buddington Smith, you must flood the market of my old country with all of these faulty weapons that I've been collecting over the past few years, so that when I invade my old country, they'll all try to fight me, but instead their guns will backfire and they'll just explode instead. And so he has this whole plan for invading and, like, retaking over the country he used to be a part of, and, the sequence is so long. And then at the end of it, he's like, oh, by the way, also, no one actually wants uranium. There's not any nuclear threat. I only was making people ask about uranium because then I would know who was evil enough to join my army. It's really weird. So, so then he, throws him back in his cell to think about it, and it turns out his cellmate is Angel Galley, the gangster from the beginning of the episode, who, instead of, like, at the beginning of the episode, this guy was, like, really creepy, and, like, he was like, oh, ho, ho, I like stabbing people, and I'm gonna drive away in my fancy car. And, like, now, at this point in the episode, and I mean, how many days have passed? 2? This guy is, like, in his dorm, basically being like, shut up, I'm studying for my murder test. and so anyway, like, his whole character has changed completely during this time period, and we then cut back to the whole thing with, like, Passad brings Napoleon back and is like, okay, have you made your decision? And Napoleon says, yeah, you know, I'll help you out. And he's like, okay, good, there's one last test. You have to kill Ernestine. And before Napoleon has to, in some way, get himself out of this situation, he does manage to make a little bit of a, there's a scuffle, basically, and they kind of run around the castle for a while, and then the problem is solved because Ilya invades, and he brings, like, a bunch of the Italian uncle agents with him, and they...
Ilya doesn't simply invade, actually, Napoleon let Ernestine go. I mean, he freed her from the castle, and she called him.
Yes, yeah. So the scuffle that happens, I guess, ends in Napoleon, like, setting Ernestine free, and Ernestine gets the other uncle agents somehow to come and help liberate the castle. And everybody is saved, and Ernestine is like, hey, wait a minute, your roommate in the kidnapping castle was Angel Galley? He's the man I needed to sign some papers! And the episode just kind of ends. And, like...
That ending just... I was just like, what just happened?
Yup! As I was, like, rewatching this episode, I was like, oh yeah, this is the one with all of the, like, weird, like, broken grenades and guns. And that was, like, the only thing I really remembered about it. And then, like, trying to pin down the plot, like, writing out what had happened, I was like, God, this sounds like something I would write. Like, how do you solve a mystery? I don't know. How do you resolve a plot? I don't know. Just, like, whatever, fine. You know what? Have, like... It did not sound like something that a professional writer would write. But, anyway.
Congratulations, because we spent more than 15 minutes just describing the plot of the episode.
Yup! It's so weird. It's a really, like, it's a bizarrely complicated and yet totally none of the complications really matter kind of plot. Like, lots of stuff happens, but none of that stuff really is in service of, like, actually moving the plot forward. So yeah, there are a bunch of things about this episode that are actually really, like, delightful, but the plot is not one of them.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, talking about stuff that doesn't make sense. For example, there is this character, Boba Barrett, I think, and he looks about the same as Angel Galley, and he has a very small part in the episode. I mean, they both have pretty small parts, and I don't even know how, like, you're supposed to understand who each of them are. Like, there may be 8 side characters in this episode who all have their own names and wants and needs, and it's, for 50 minutes, it's too many. And at the same time, some of the scenes are too long. And they could be shorter. It's a mess.
I know that feeling.
Like, for example, them taking separate flights to Italy, I think it may have made sense in one of the previous drafts, maybe.
Yeah, that's very much what it feels like in this episode, is that, like,
yeah,
there were things that ended up being changed, but that they didn't change everything else to align with those changes.
Yeah,
like, that it was almost like it wasn't a final draft.
And it really feels like there were like 15 drafts because so many things happen, so many characters.
I feel like, yeah, I feel like this is one of those like problem scripts where like I'm not just saying scripts like this happens to me when I'm writing fiction too, that you are trying so hard to make it good. You keep polishing it and repolishing it and polishing it over and over again, but just nothing is making it work like how you want to. So you just got so frustrated by the end of it. You're just like, fine, good enough.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. Like that idea that it's like that's why they have script doctors, like people who come in to, like literally their job is to fix like scripts that don't quite work. But I feel like considering the pace of writing and filming on this show, there were bound to be a couple of scripts that just were like, it's done enough.
Yep.
And like, I mean, maybe they rewrote the script, but at the same time they wanted to keep all the fun scenes, and that's why it's a mess. I don't even know. It's just so much. Yesterday, I watched this episode for maybe 5th or 4th time, I mean, in my life, and I had a very hard time understanding what it was about. Even though I have seen it more than once or twice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. And again, there are a bunch of things about it that are like actually quite charming.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of, and maybe that's part of the problem was it was a kill your darlings kind of situation where they didn't want to get rid of a bunch of scenes that worked, but they didn't know how to make those scenes work together.
Yeah. So it's a fun episode to watch like without thinking about it, but when you actually try to think.
Yes.
Okay, I think we could like do a scene by scene analysis or like talk. So in the very first scene, we can see Angel talking to a nuclear guy. And actually, this guy who was supposed to sell him uranium, he refused to sell him uranium, and that's why Angel killed him. Because...
Yes, he...
So, later, Angel stabbed him and he ran away, and Napoleon and Lydia started following him. And then Napoleon started following him because Lydia was left with the man who was dying. And Napoleon saw a man watching Angel getting kidnapped, and because I have ADHD, all this time I thought it was Angel just standing there. I just didn't notice him being kidnapped because my attention didn't go to that part of the thing. It's weird. It happens sometimes.
Yeah, I will.
I'm very bad.
I will say
bad at watching action movies because I just don't digest action at all.
I will say my notes for that scene were like, I liked Ilya jumping off the wall. That's a very nice car. Like, clearly I also did not follow the action appropriately. I was also distracted by things that were happening in the scene that were not the kidnapping.
Yeah, that happens to me, like... That happens to me throughout this episode. I just was noticing things, but like all the wrong things that don't have anything to do with the plot. Like I noticed that the tailor shop, like Del Floria's in Rome, it's not like they just reuse the set and call it something else. No, it literally is called Del Floria's, even though it's in Rome.
Yup. At least he has an Italian name.
Like, the sign is just Del Floria's, but it's Rome, and I'm just like, oh my god. It's like the total, like, I'm not sure if they're purposely, like alluding to the fact that it's a reused set, or if they're just trying to be like, oh yeah, Uncle has Del Floria's all over the world.
Actually, it's another set, but the sign is the same, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The outside's another set, but the inside's the same. Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about.
Wherever you go.
That's what I'm talking about. The inside set is reused.
Yeah.
I also wrote down, do all the Del Florias get tired of all the weird-ass looks Napoleon give them? Because Napoleon, like, we've talked before about how Robert Vaughn has a super rubbery face. Like, every single time he enters Del Floria's, he, like, wriggles his eyebrows and, like, makes, like, these weird expressions as he's coming in. And it's like, if I were the guy who was in charge of, like, guarding the fake tailor shop where Uncle lived, I would be like, oh god, this guy again! Always coming in here and wiggling his eyebrows at me.
Oh, that's so funny. Also, like, in the scene in which Napoleon actually comes to the New York headquarters, there is a receptionist who's played, I think, by a Korean actress, maybe. Because, I mean, she has a Korean name. Her name is Wanda Mae Kim, of the character. And they have this really weird exchange in which she says to Napoleon, they are waiting for you, and he says, who? And she corrects him, whom? And
yes, I really liked that. It's particularly funny because there's a scene in Finny Foot where Chris, the little boy, does something similar and Napoleon corrects him. And so, like, apparently everyone at Uncle is just a grammar pedant.
And it's funny because every time I watched it, I thought that they implied that she didn't understand what he said, but actually she corrected him. And
yup.
It's weird. It's funny, yeah.
Yeah, she also, the conversation is interesting because when he asks, like, who is in the office, she says, Mr. Kuryakin, and Napoleon seems sort of, like, baffled by this, and I guess, like, thinking about it, it's probably because Waverly isn't in this episode, so he was expecting Waverly to be in there, not Ilya, but on the other hand, it's like, he's the only other reoccurring character. Who do you think is waiting for you?
And then later, we gotta talk about how Ilya is very upset in this scene. I mean, he is acting very emotional again.
Ilya's everything in this scene is just delightful.
Yeah. Do you remember how he was sitting holding his face in his hands?
It's so cute. So cute. He's resting. So Waverly's office has, like, instead of a normal table, like, a giant Lazy Susan in it, and so, like, particularly in the first season, they kind of stopped doing this later. They'll, like, spin files to each other. So, like, someone will have, like, a folder in front of them, and then someone will spin the table in the direction of the person who they need to see the file. And, so Ilya is leaning on the little spinning table, like, with his chin in his hands, and it's incredibly adorable. And then Napoleon spins the table, and, like, his elbows kind of, like, skid along it for a second, and then he, like, glares at Napoleon. It's wonderful.
Yeah. It's also funny because there is this contrast in this episode, because afterwards Ilya acts very cold, and with people who he doesn't really know, he's absolutely different, I would say. And
Yeah.
in this scene where when he's only with Napoleon, he's very emotional and he shows that he's nervous, that he is like not sure about this case and everything. But later, in this whole episode, he doesn't show as many emotions in any other scene. I would say.
Yeah, I think this is a good episode in terms of like seeing that kind of dichotomy with Ilya, where he actually is not, as we've sort of joked earlier, he's not an anime ice prince.
So basically, later they get 2 separate flights to Rome. Again, who knows why? I don't. And Napoleon goes to the Floria, and he's greeted by the receptionist who is called Venetia, and she just checks him out quite thoroughly, I would say.
This is my favorite shit.
Speaks Italian.
Yeah, Napoleon's Italian is much better than a number of the other languages he, quote, speaks. It's much more, like, fluent and rapid sounding, whereas he often kind of is like, bonjour!
Bonjour.
But, bonjour!
Mercy.
Yeah, it's... So there's also a scene when he's being hypnotized, and the hypnosis really is only a thing in the first season, and it's the whole thing where like when they need to take on an undercover identity, they go through a hypnosis thing where supposedly they're getting like all of the details of this character they're playing ingrained in their minds, but like frankly it doesn't really ever seem to matter. Which is probably why it goes away later on. But it's while Napoleon is having this done, one of the lady Italian uncle agents like is literally straddling him in the chair he's being hypnotized in and like kisses his forehead. And I don't know, I just feel like Napoleon is like, I love Italy.
Yeah, because like after like the woman kisses his forehead, he just has like just the biggest, brightest smile ever, and he just is like he looks so content and happy, and then the smile just kind of gradually falls away when he realizes nothing more is gonna happen.
You also forget that actually she first approached Ilya, and he looked very unhappy about it. Do you remember when
there's also
Ilya was also sitting there getting his information about his character, and she came to him and she tried to listen to what he was listening in his earphones, and Ilya looked very displeased about the fact that she invaded his personal space. And then later she went to Napoleon and he was very happy about it.
Yeah, Ilya doesn't like it when his personal space bubble is popped, particularly by women.
Yeah.
But when it's popped by Napoleon.
Also, there's an exchange of glances between Ilya and Napoleon when they're being told that they are taking on these identities. So this is before the hypnosis. That is like totally inexplicable. It looks like they are sharing some kind of inside joke, except nothing has been spoken along those lines. Like, they look at each other over the shoulder of the, like, Italian Mr. Waverly, and they just kind of smile at each other like, oh, you're thinking what I'm thinking, aren't you? But we never know what they're thinking. It's a really weird moment, because, like, if it were something that were happening in a background of a scene, I would think, okay, well, the actors just chose to do this, but, like, the camera very specifically is like, okay, and now there's a shot of Ilya's face? Okay, and now there's a shot of Napoleon's face. Good, the audience has had some information communicated to them now. It's like, no, the audience has not had information communicated to them. The audience just thinks that they're having sex.
Again. It's actually wasn't just that. I mean, they didn't show Ilya's close-up. They only showed him behind Italian Miss Waverly. And
Senor Waverly. Signor.
I actually know what his name was. His name was Venetia, and it's just that you pay. We as viewers pay attention to all these small things because they are very obvious, and it could actually be like just a smile, but it was very striking in the scene, and you just couldn't miss it, I guess. So later they go to this secret place, and a bunch of stuff happens in it. I would like actually to ask Logan, what do you remember about the restaurant scene?
What I remember is something that you probably all remember too. It's the belly dance.
Sure is.
So, like, this is like the most absurd transfer of information between uncle agents I have ever seen. So, like, Napoleon, like, because there's like the belly dancer, and like there's I can't quite remember. Like they were trying to communicate something. Napoleon and
actually, they weren't. She was just the receptionist of the Italian uncle, and he was surprised to see her.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't even remember the specifics because Napoleon's behavior just is like seared into my mind. And what I mean by his
real
behavior,
weird.
I know I keep putting off saying it, but like he just starts like belly dancing, and it's like everyone starts laughing, but like I think might be doing it as like I can't tell if it's part of his disguise.
Yeah, it is.
Or if it's just.
Yeah,
but
it definitely is.
I mean, he is in disguise, but like I wouldn't put it past Napoleon just doing it for a fun time either. So I think it's kind of a combo of establishing his disguise and Napoleon just wanting to show off to people that he can belly dance.
So, I will say, I wrote down in response to this scene, Napoleon only has two disguises. Gay and ugly American.
Yep.
And, like, Buddington Smith is, like, the kind of jerk American who is like, I'm going to go to a club, and I'm going to get up on the dance floor where someone is performing, and I, too, will perform. The kind of drunk, disorderly American who gets kicked out of places in other countries because they cannot behave in a normal human way.
Yep. That's what happens when you're Buddington Smith from something Falls, Idaho. Idaho. I was like combining Idaho and Iowa.
My favorite of our beautiful 50 states, Iowa.
I was like combining Iowa and Idaho. Wait, is that their ship name?
Iowa, Idaho, OTP.
I mean,
potatoes
like,
and corn forever.
I mean, like, there's Italia, which makes countries shippable. So, like, I bet someone's made like hot versions of the states so they can ship them.
God, I'm picturing, like, Maine is a lobsterman. Florida is, like, a dude with a backwards hat who licks people's faces.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry, I say this with full affection towards Florida man. No, I really don't.
So, Hannah said that Napoleon would get kicked out of all clubs, and he actually kind of is, because the proprietor of that club tries to lead him out of the restaurant, but at the same time, Ilya actually shows up and they get distracted. And it was a very funny scene because when Napoleon sees Ilya, he looked so like in awe for some reason. I mean, it was supposed to be like they were supposed to have a business meeting in this restaurant, so it made sense in the episode. It still looked very funny. And
I wrote down that his glasses and his cane were a look.
Yeah, and like, even though Ilya actually is supposed to have a wife in this disguise, and the wife is played by the uncle secretary who invaded his personal space before. Ilya looks very uninterested in his wife, and
yeah, super uninterested in his wife.
He once again,
even the way he introduces her.
Yeah.
This is my wife, Gemma. Like, oh, sparks got out of that marriage.
Oh yeah, so hot and spicy.
And later, like, Napoleon, as Paddington Smith, keeps dancing with her. I mean, to get information, because she tells him all about people who visit this restaurant. But it looks like, like they are swingers.
On this episode of Wife Swap.
They got Ilya to pretend that he has a wife, and they had them interact 0 times. I mean, why was she even supposed to be his wife? It was so funny.
Yeah, they're like, they could just be like, hey, this woman works in the same scientific field as me or something.
Yeah.
But no. I have to ask, I wrote down in my notes, in all capital letters, and I cannot remember why I wrote this down or what it means.
Okay.
Tiny flaming birds.
What? I don't know what that is either. I don't know what that is. I'm sorry, I can't help you.
I wrote it down between Buddington Smith and Ilya's glasses and a cane. So it's before Ilya comes into the club. Apparently I noticed tiny flaming birds, or I was having a stroke when I was writing these notes.
This is very funny. I have no idea what
Now I feel like I need to go back to this episode and make sure I didn't hit my head while I was watching it. What did I need? And I wrote it in all caps, so I was clearly excited about it.
Yeah, because when I write something, the things I have written in all caps in my notes are Buddington Smith? What kind of name is that? And Napoleon, why are you belly dancing?
I don't know. My all caps is tiny flaming birds, and then my other all caps is Napoleon tells Gemma that, and this is the part that's in all caps, you only think she's a spy because you're a woman. So, there's a moment after Ernestine breaks into Napoleon's room that Gemma comes in and is talking to him about this, and Gemma is like, well, she's gotta be some kind of agent or counter-agent involved in this uranium plot, and Napoleon's like, no, I don't think she is, I think she's just some rando. And Gemma is like, no, why else would she have broken into your room and threatened you with a gun? And Napoleon literally is like, well, you wouldn't think that if she wasn't pretty. And it's like, Napoleon, really, bud? Like, really? That's your reasoning, is that she's jealous of the woman who came in to shoot you in the night.
For Napoleon, coming to kill him is flirting. He only understands flirting when it's done like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, considering, it's like, wasn't, like, the thrush woman, like, there was, like, a thrush woman that he totally was, like, flirting with, like...
Angelique?
Angelique! Yes, Angelique! And then there's, like, Satine and stuff, and, like, I just think that, like, Napoleon, like, I think that, like, killing and flirting is very close together for Napoleon.
Napoleon is like, you know what? What I was about to say was not appropriate. I'm gonna stop. You can imagine what I was gonna say, and probably it'll be worse than what I was actually gonna say, but there we go.
Maybe you should type it, actually, because... I'm curious.
I just spit coffee on my shirt. And when I am done cleaning that up, I will text what I was going to say. Also, I just noticed the photos that you guys sent of the characters who look exactly the same.
Yeah. I mean, they don't look exactly the same for me. It's Angel and Bobo. I mean, what? They are the same person.
Well, you have to remember, there's right part and left part. That helps.
So sorry. I read what Hannah said.
Let's just say danger is a necessary element for Napoleon to have a good time.
So that's why he keeps pissing off Ilya.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. You know, I think Napoleon just, like, you know, people think Napoleon's all wholesome and everything, but no, he would be reading so much...
Do people think Napoleon is wholesome?
No.
Well, like, because Napoleon, like, okay, I think wholesome's the wrong word, actually. But, like, they think he's, like, more, they think he's more, like, emotional than Ilya, and, like, even though Ilya definitely has emotions, too, and, like, I think Napoleon would read a lot of really, like, angsty romance.
Yeah. I actually don't think that Napoleon is more emotional than Ilya. I think he's more emotionally repressed than Ilya. Because
I would agree with that. I totally agree with that. Napoleon is very much like, I will smile and be very charming, and you will not know what I'm really thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
he's a people pleaser, and so he's very good at making it seem like he's being open and emotional, but in actuality, like, his real feelings are buried under the surface.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So
it's interesting because, you know, thinking about like what we said earlier with Ilya, tends to be much more sort of like cheerful and demonstrative when he's with Napoleon. Napoleon tends to, I think, let down that facade of cheerfulness when he's with Ilya. Like he's capable of being a little more like, yeah, this sucks.
Yeah. And that's really important for me in their relationship, because they act very differently when they're together, I mean, with each other and not everybody else. And it's like they can be their real selves with each other, I would say. Because Ilya doesn't want people to think that he's emotional, and Napoleon doesn't want people to think that he is like pessimistic sometimes or something like that. And
Napoleon doesn't want people to see any part of him that's not positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
He likes being the golden boy.
Yeah, he wants to think that he's always happy.
I'm finding my disc for this episode because I have to see if I'm insane about the birds.
Report back.
So, actually, I would say...
Right, I'm sticking it in my computer and I'm going to see if I can find birds.
Okay. I would say that Napoleon saying that Ernestine couldn't be a counter-agent goes pretty well with the fact that when they were discussing this case with Ilya, they were like, is that this whole plot doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, and that there couldn't be a counterplot because it all just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, how do you have a counter plot for something that's barely a plot?
Yeah, and that's my feelings about this episode as well. And I mean, I told us that we would talk about this episode for a long time because we haven't even gotten through half of it. And it's already almost an hour of recording. So basically, when Ernestine comes to Napoleon's bedroom at night, he's wearing like a very cutesy pajamas. And he's like pretending to be sleeping. It's so funny because he's like his pajamas.
I found the tiny flaming birds. They're eating at the club. They're eating like Cornish hens. And they're on skewers on fire.
That's not what I was imagining.
No,
tiny flaming birds. I was like imagining like, okay, this is kind of really sad, but I was imagining like tiny little cute songbirds trying to fly through the air, but they're on fire, so they're actually dying while they're flying. I know. No. So they're little fireballs.
No, it's just dinner, apparently, and for some reason I was really excited about these tiny Cornish hens, or whatever they are. I think it's because they're too small to even be Cornish hens. Like, it looks like they must be eating, like, pigeons or something.
Pigeons.
Alright, well, that mystery is solved.
I mean...
this time I wasn't having a stroke.
I can think of these birds, but only in Russian, so I won't name names. I mean, it's like a European thing, like French people eat these tiny birds. I don't remember what they call it in English, so I have no idea. Yeah, so basically, let's talk about how Napoleon's bedroom is basically like the hottest spot in town.
I mean, I feel like that's always true.
Yeah.
There are so many episodes where we see Napoleon in his pajamas because something weird happens in his hotel room. Like, Napoleon is constantly being intruded on by people with guns in his hotel room.
They just choose it.
And he's always wearing his pajamas and shoes.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would start, like, if you're getting like surprised in your pajamas that much, like, wouldn't you just start like sleeping in your suit so you can always be like prepared to look styling, or
you know that's the
not
only
give a crap.
And no, you know that the only reason he wears pajamas at all is because he keeps being burst in on in the middle of the night. After the, 15th time a gunman came in and he was like, "Oh god, I'm naked," he was like, "Oh, fine, I'll buy a pair of pajamas." Because Napoleon Solo is 100% the kind of person who sleeps nude. Like,
oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, Napoleon is totally a naked sleeper, right?
And so he started wearing pajamas because he was like, after the 15th time of someone being like, "Oh, Jesus Christ," when they came in.
Okay, but maybe it would actually give him, a head up.
Yeah. The advantage of surprise.
He is really into people who are trying to kill him, so, maybe, it'll be a setup for something more.
Jesus Christ, can you imagine, you're going to rob someone and, you break into their hotel room and they just, pull down the covers and are like, "Hello."
I need to put that in my Man's Uncle Crack fic.
And Napoleon Solo was never robbed again. Or maybe he was robbed a lot more.
Well, we do know that, assuming Napoleon has the same butt as Robert Vaughn, which I am assuming is true, even though we can leave it up to our imagination since we never see Napoleon's naked butt within the Man from U.N.C.L.E. show. There is a scene in a movie of Robert Vaughn where you can see one of his butt cheeks, and and I'm going somewhere with this, and it has this really cute little freckle on the butt cheek. So I think Napoleon probably has a cute little freckle on his butt cheek too. So I imagine someone being going on his body and then being like, "Wow, that's a cute butt cheek freckle."
Oh boy. I mean, I feel like the idea that he would be lying there in bed, not only naked, but just butt up. Napoleon, why? That's not how normal people sleep.
It's how Napoleon Solo sleeps, and he's not a normal person.
You know what? The only words that I come to my mind are words from Austin Powers or something like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I actually Austin Powers has the horniness of Napoleon Solo, but like turned up like it's way more.
Yeah. It's really fun to watch after the Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh yeah, it totally is. I'm pretty sure all the Austin Power movies are on Netflix, at least American Netflix. So good to know.
Okay, full disclosure, I've actually never seen Austin Powers.
You should. At least the first one.
I almost saw the first one when I was like 10, maybe.
That's not a
because
good age.
No, not an appropriate movie for 10-year-old to see. So I was at one of my friend's houses, and he was like, we should watch Austin Powers. And so he put it on, and we got through, like, the first 3 minutes, and then his mom walked in and was like, what are you doing? And took the VHS tape out of the VCR and was like, no, bad. You do not show guests Austin Powers. And I've never seen it. That's my Austin Powers story.
That's my future children.
I think Austin Powers much more directly parodies James Bond.
Yeah.
But it is still thoroughly enjoyable.
I mean, James Bond and the Avengers, the British show from the 60s, but they all have like it had a bit of a similar energy to Man from U.N.C.L.E, I would say, even though it isn't directly inspired by it.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it has, like, it kind of feels like a more extreme version of season 3 of Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yeah, it really does.
I mean, it's like, you know, the R-rated season 3 parody.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's a perfect description.
But a lot less gay.
Yeah.
So
that is always a disappointment.
Basically, 4 people attempt to enter Napoleon's room. But only 3 people succeed. So basically, first Ernestine comes to kill him. I mean, not to kill him, she wants to know where
have some papers signed.
Yeah, where Angel is. And she asks him because she thinks that he knows where Angel is, but he doesn't. And then Ilya comes from the balcony and says that somebody wanted to drop in, and he dropped out. And it was like, I guess it was a man who wanted to kidnap Napoleon, I would say, because it's according to the main plot. I mean, they kidnapped him later, but like they wanted to kidnap him from his room, I guess, and Ilya prevented it from happening. And then also Gemma comes to his room, and they talk about Ernestine. So it's like so many people come and go from Napoleon's room. It's so funny. And he is at first in pajamas, but later he changes into his suit, so it's not that inappropriate. and basically later he goes to spy on Ernestine because he thinks that she's up to something bigger than what she is actually. And he has this very funny tracing device. And he stands like by the side of a road and tries to listen to her. And people walk by and he pretends that it's some kind of a toy. Do you remember it happening? He like starts blowing into it like it's like, I don't know, bubbles or something.
Like a pinwheel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Passad later asks him about it. He's like, what does an arms dealer have to, like, why does an arms dealer have a spying device? And Napoleon's like, I got it in the same place you got all of your faulty weapons? Question mark.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So
This is another episode that also deals with, or at least touches on some like real world politics.
yeah.
They say Hitler.
You're right. They do.
They say Hitler.
Whoa.
I took note of that. Like they talk about like they actually it's just a passing reference when they're talking about like it's like the weapons and bombs that were used like against Hitler or something along those lines. But like they actually say Hitler in this episode.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe because it's not actually about anything related to World War II this time.
Yeah.
Like they're allowed to say it because otherwise it would be an unclear reference.
yeah. But they also make a reference to like a time of unrest in Hungary because they don't say this was a revolution or something like that. They just say a time of unrest.
Yeah, but it's interesting because they talk about like it's during the very long sequence where Posada's talking about like why he has all these weapons and like what they all are going to do, and he references a bunch of real world events when he's talking about it, and I thought that was interesting in terms of again how like the show kind of waffles on the extent to which they're gonna touch things that are political.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there are some episodes where it's like that's kind of real world politics are used for flavor, and then there's other episodes where it's like, we're not going to touch the real world politics with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah. And
It must depend on the writer.
I mean, in this episode, they didn't actually touch any real politics, like, in a real way. As you said, it was only, like, mentions. So it's not that political.
Yeah, it's... Mm-hmm. No, it's just, like, used as seasoning.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's also a lot of talk about how guns work.
Yeah.
Kind of tuned out during that.
Okay, let's talk about how Napoleon pretended to be Paddington Smith in prison, I guess. It was serious.
His whole...
Yeah, go on.
His whole Buddington Smith persona is... I feel like it's not all that dissimilar to his oh god, I just lost his name.
Harry.
He was on a boat and he goes under the water.
Harvey
Muller?
Yeah. Harvey Muller. Yeah.
Harvey Muller, yes. It's not all that dissimilar to his Harvey Muller persona, except that he doesn't have the like Midwestern accent.
Your boy.
And yeah, it again, as I wrote down, Napoleon really can only do two undercover personas. He can do basically like jerk American who's like, I deal in arms and corn, or he can do like when he's like the director in the King of Diamonds, the something diamond, the diamond something affair, or like when he's Edward Applegate. It's like he can either be like a little fey or he's an ugly American. Those are the two choices. Like,
I think it's because he's no. I shouldn't say this. This is actually really bad.
Are you implying that perhaps those are two facets of his personality?
I was implying those are two facets of his sexuality. It's really stereotypical. It's so stereotypical that I didn't want to say it. I'm not bisexual, but like I am gay, so
there are two Napoleons inside of you. There's the gay one that's a director. And there's the straight one that's an arms dealer. I will say, as a bisexual, that is true of me. My two personas are director and arms dealer.
That's it. Bisexuality solved.
Solved, exactly. We figured it out. No, I do kind of agree with that. Like, it's like the kind of undercover personae that Napoleon takes on, I do think to some extent are kind of exaggerations of his own qualities.
Yeah.
Like, he always seems super excited when he gets to do, like, the really hammy, over-the-top acting in either direction. Like, it seems like he gets a real kick out of, like, playing up these kind of stereotypical pieces of himself. And it's interesting then also thinking about how Ilya is like almost always made to go undercover as a scientist, and his persona is basically always just like grumpy.
Yeah, but also in the next episode you will see a very different disguise of Ilya. I mean, it also goes over the top sometimes, but not as much as Napoleon, I guess. Like,
yeah. When Ilya is when Ilya is doing more like actual acting and not just putting on a pair of glasses and being like, I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, I feel like you can't quite as easily characterize Ilya's non-scientist undercover options, except that they are often, and I'm putting this in big 1960s quotation marks, please be... I'm saying this from the perspective of the series, that he's often put in, quote, ethnic roles.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate, because it's like, his actor is Scottish.
Yeah, he is like the whitest white person ever. But I guess, like, because, like, Russian seems exotic to Americans,
Yeah.
I guess that makes it so he goes into the ethnic roles. I don't know. It's bad. And like, I mean, it's unfortunate regardless of what the white person looks like. But like him, he's like platinum blonde. Like what?
But
It's not even logical.
If it was Napoleon doing it, it would be even worse.
I feel like it's equally bad either way. Like, no matter what, having a white guy play someone who's not white is like, oh, you made a bad choice. Try again.
When it's a bit convincing, it's still better than when it's absolutely not convincing, so...
Yeah. It's bad regardless, but I think that if you were from the perspective of someone who would run U.N.C.L.E. and you're trying to be actually competent, and you and like, well, U.N.C.L.E.'s not competent though. I'm not saying it is.
No,
but like, if you like, if and you didn't have anyone of that race to actually do the mission, which is like they totally do, but they don't use them because they're women. And not protagonists because they're women. But I think because Napoleon has like dark hair and isn't like that, and like more people in the world have dark hair than platinum blonde hair, then like I think it might be a bit more logical.
Yeah.
It's still bad though. I'm not saying it's good. It's still really bad, but like.
But from a like spycraft perspective,
yeah,
like,
from a spycraft perspective, I think
take your best shot.
If you have to have one of the two white protagonists be a person of color.
I'm going to send you a picture when it loads, and it's going to be very bad. And you will like it.
Concern.
So maybe continue talking because it's loading very slowly.
So I watched one of the special features that was on the the end of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. box sets, and I wrote down a couple things that I thought were super entertaining about like the production of the series, particularly early on. And one of my favorite things was just that like all of the writers for the set, for the show, kept talking about like Robert Vaughn and David McCallum, and every single one of the writers was like, they were just so charming. Both of them are just so charming. Such charming men. And I thought that was super adorable.
That's nice. So...
Also, oh yeah, yes. Napoleon and his fez. That is one of the ones where he is being... actually, well, it's weird because...
It's not very good.
Let me preface this by saying, I am, as I said, I'm bisexual. I'm fairly butch, and I feel like at first glance a lot of people would assume that I am a lesbian. And so I am saying this from the perspective of, I understand that you can be bisexual and, you know, like, seem stereotypically gay, but in this particular role that Napoleon is doing, he seemed really super gay. But... the whole thing in this episode was that he's just like, as this character with this long cigarette and the pursed lips and the little fez and the little glasses and the robe, he's just like hitting on all the women. And so... 100%, like, I understand, because it is my lived experience, that, like, one can be, flamboyant without necessarily being one sexuality or another.
Yeah.
But it's 100% one of Napoleon's gayer roles. Despite the women.
Yep, he's either like two disguises: gay or rural American.
Yeah, like those are the two options. Also, in the same special feature where they were talking about how just adorable and charming Robert Vaughn and David McCallum were, there's also a point where they're talking about how the series was cast, and Robert Vaughn says he got a call and was told, hey, read this script and let us know if you're interested, and he said that at the time he was working on The Lieutenant, and he went out drinking at midnight when he got off of filming, and he was like, and then me and like this other guy from The Lieutenant were out until like 4:30 in the morning drinking, and he was supposed to have a meeting at 9 the next morning with the person who had sent him the script, and he did not read it. And so on the way to the meeting, he would stop at every stoplight and read like 2 pages. And so he read the pilot for Man from U.N.C.L.E. Driving, which is extremely unsafe. And he got there and was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Sounds great. And he says that he finished the whole thing while he was driving, but I don't know, like, it seems like it would be difficult to finish 65 pages of reading at stoplights. So 100%, like, a hungover Robert Vaughn agreed to a series he had probably read 10 pages of.
Yeah. And he nobody also read his parts, so...
I only skipped to the parts with my name on it.
Yeah. Actors are like this.
Yeah. And then they were talking about the casting of David McCallum, and we had mentioned in a previous episode that there was the whole sort of screw up where they said basically get rid of the guy who they wanted to get rid of Ilya, and instead ended up getting rid of the first person who was cast to play Waverly.
Yeah.
But when they were talking about how the show was cast, there's a scene where in the special feature where Robert Vaughn and David McCallum are being interviewed at the same time, and Robert Vaughn says, "Yeah, I already knew of David McCallum. I knew of him from Freud, and I thought it was a really great picture." And his words were, "I thought he just photographed sensationally. I thought he was beautiful on the screen." And then he reaches over and, like, touches David McCallum, and David McCallum just makes this face like, "You've been doing this for 50 years." And it's like, I just, Robert Vaughn is a delight.
Yeah, he's a delight. He was a delightful human being, and he's so great.
Also, apparently the reason NBC wanted to get rid of David McCallum, why they didn't want him cast as Ilya, was not because he was Russian, not because they didn't like his acting, it was because he was a long hair. A dirty long hair!
Wait, seriously?
And they were like, he's a hippie, get him off the show, and then they accidentally cut someone else instead.
Well, then, like, but the thing is that, like, that would be such a bad decision because, like, the Beatles were just coming into popularity at this point, and they had hair just like him.
Yup!
When they cast him, it was still 63, and I mean, Beatles only became big like a couple of years later, so he was ahead of his time.
Oh, I thought.
Yep.
Didn't they come to America in '64?
Yeah.
Wasn't it 65?
It was either 64 or 65.
It was 64, I think. They were already established by 65.
Okay. But still, like, it was one more year, I guess.
Yeah. And it's, well, I mean, you gotta think about it this way, like, the NBC executives were almost certainly, like, old.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, you gotta be thinking, like, these are people who probably were born in, I mean, if it's 1963 and they're older, like, these are people who were probably born in, like, 1905. So,
Yeah.
like, they're looking at, Ilya / David McCallum, and they're just like, nope, we're not doing that.
Oh, yes,
And, like, they wouldn't necessarily have, much like is the case today when things are done by committee, particularly if they're done by committee and the people on the committee are not sort of in touch with youth trends, then they don't see what's going to be popular, they only know what has been popular.
Yeah.
This actually reminds me a lot of, for the Monkees. They originally had Mickey Dolenz straighten his hair because they didn't see, like, they didn't really realize that, like, curly hair was, like, in the late 60s, but then it kind of, because of like Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix and stuff, they started just being like, oh, he can have curly hair now.
Oh.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, I mean, there was such a sea change culturally during that time period in terms of, like, what was acceptable on television. Like, there's a reason there's such a huge shift aesthetically over the 4 seasons of Man from U.N.C.L.E. because it's happening during this whole counterculture movement.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, now it wouldn't be the same at all because at the moment culture is pretty static, I would say, because when you watch a show that was filmed like 15 years ago, you don't really see a lot of difference, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say the only major difference is seeing something like that, like from 15 years ago, would be like minor technology things.
Yeah.
Like that's the main difference for me. Like cell phones would be different, but as far as like cultural mindsets and stuff, it's not too different.
Okay, is that actually true, or are we just
I'm bullshitting.
Are we blind to our own cultural zeitgeist? You know, like, can we not see the changes that have happened over our lifetime? Like, would someone who was born in 1950, watching what was happening through the 50s and 60s in terms of television, would they have a similar opinion about their own view of television?
No, I don't know. I don't actually think so, because back then television was pretty new, and so it was more visible and more interesting what was happening on TV. And not like now when TV is basically background noise.
I guess mostly I just am thinking in terms of, like, cultural changes that are visual within what has been filmed.
But we could talk about women wearing trousers or miniskirts or something like that, because it was pretty revolutionary. And again, speaking of hairstyles, I mean, have you seen any new hairstyles in recent 30 years? I don't think so.
Do you remember, was this a thing in Russia? The bump it.
Oh.
What? I know what that is.
I don't know. Type it, please, because
it's wild.
It was this thing where you literally would put, like, a lump in your hair to make it taller, and it was like, it was very popular among people who were big into, like, Jersey Shore and some of those other, reality TV series during the early 2000s, because it was, that was how the women on that show wore their hair. I'm trying to find a good picture of it, but I feel like there are trends that would pin down things from 2000 to now in a certain time period. We just can't see them.
In the early 2010s, there were things like making big holes in your ears and stuff, but it all just went.
The big hole. So, as someone who was a teenager who shopped at Hot Topic, which is for I would assume there's no Hot Topic in Russia.
No.
It's basically a store for goths.
Yeah, I know.
Gauges, the big holes in your ears. Those remain popular among that particular subculture of people.
Oh wow.
But they are not.
I honestly think that when it comes to hair, I think the main thing that has happened over the past few years is that, like, dyeing your hair unnatural colors has become a lot more mainstream.
Oh yeah,
yeah, I would agree with that.
Just anime.
Mm-hmm.
Just anime.
It's anime.
We are all anime.
Yep.
Okay, so
yeah, like, I mean,
maybe we should go back to the
episode. We're so far away. We're like,
we're talking about, like, the philosophy of hairdos in the early 2000s.
Oh yeah, we haven't talked about the gay wrestling scene.
Yeah.
All right, we should talk about the homoerotic wrestling.
So the thing about this episode is that wait, I lost my train of thought.
Oh.
Were you distracted?
Oh yeah, okay, I just
wrestling?
remembered. Okay, I got it. So I feel like there are, like, multiple circumstances where, like, there are opportunities for Napoleon to be shirtless. What I mean by this is that, like imagine, like, shirtless belly dancing Napoleon, but then also during this homoerotic wrestling scene, all of the other guys, like, took off their shirts, but Napoleon didn't, and it made me irrationally angry.
is like the anti-Captain Kirk. Like, if Star Trek is all about finding excuses for William Shatner to suddenly not have a shirt for no reason, then, like, Man from U.N.C.L.E. is like, hey, we're gonna put Napoleon in a situation where he shouldn't have a shirt, but he's gonna have a shirt!
Yeah. Like, I think there's only one scene in the entirety of Man from U.N.C.L.E. where he's, like, fully shirtless, and that's, like, in a movie.
No,
like
actually, it happens in
Is there more?
Yeah, it happens in the show in season 3 as well, so you have something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't know if it's just that that Man from U.N.C.L.E. was a little more demure about, like, I mean, I'm gonna say toplessness, you know, than Star Trek or some later shows were, or if maybe Robert Vaughn wasn't super comfortable with it, because we do see Ilya shirtless a handful of times, although I suspect at least...
But that's just because everybody wants to see you shirtless.
I'm pretty sure that was fan service.
Yeah. But it's really interesting that we don't get any Napoleon... We get very little Napoleon fan service of that type. I mean, we talked about in the... the one where he goes to the island with the man who drinks lizard juice. Green Opal. We all were talking during Green Opal Affair about how, like, we were excited that he was wearing a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Like, clearly, like, this is he's always very dressed up.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as someone who's not, like, really super, that's not fan service for me. Like, I'm not into, like, men in suits, men in uniform. I feel like maybe that was the thing, was that they thought that the fact that he was, like, often in a tux counted as fan service.
Yeah.
I mean, probably to some people that's fan service.
I mean,
definitely. That's a big thing for a lot of people.
For me, it was fan service.
So, I am super into women in suits.
Oh yeah. I get it.
But men in suits just don't really do it for me.
Oh.
I want every dude to look like an extra from Hair. Like, just bell bottoms, like, in a ratty t-shirt and long curly hair. That's what every man should look like.
Just because you grew up with movies from the 70s.
Yeah, let me be clear here. I'm not, like, significantly older than I'm claiming to be. My mom just showed me a lot of movies from the 70s when I was a kid. And my mom showed me a lot of really not appropriate movies from the 70s as a kid, and I think that it influenced my my development in a way that made it so that, like, my number one man type is just, like, guy with really long hair and jeans. Who maybe looks like he, like, smells like patchouli. Whereas that's really not my type for women at all. So, I don't know. Thanks, Mom.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it's...
So, there is a scene in which Napoleon, again, as Paddington Smith, is supposed to fight a guy just to please Fasik. And it's a very funny scene because he pretends that he can't fight at all, and he just gets beaten up in quite a slapstick way, I would say.
Yeah. He throws the fight quite spectacularly.
Yeah, it's very funny. And he also, like, ends up on his own force, and then he gets, like, a bucket of water thrown at him. It's just abuse. And I mean, when he had a bucket of water thrown into his face, he looked so unhappy.
Even in an episode that's completely landlocked, they find a way to torture Robert Vaughn with water.
They just had to do it, like, they couldn't resist it.
I literally was saying to my husband today, like, we were discussing the fact that he's so often thrown in the water, and I was like, I mean, I kind of understand that. Like, I feel like Robert Vaughn seems like the kind of person who would just be really fun to torment. And my husband was like, what is wrong with you? I was like, no, like, you know, it seems like it'd be really fun to tease him. And I think that I may have just found, like, my villain story is like, I joined Thrush to be mean to Napoleon Solo.
Yeah.
That's it, like, I just want to be mean to him.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people who joined Thrush just to torture Io.
So, Hannah, your government-assigned kin is Thrush Agent.
I am one of the Thrush agents who has a glossy 5x5 of Napoleon in my pocket.
Oh.
I just want to slap his beautiful face.
I'm glad you said face.
And, like, later, he gets, like, beaten up into submission, and he officially joins the 6th Army, and he gets a uniform. And Fasik is like, I will make you a duke if you help me to destabilize my country's economy. And basically, afterwards, it's just like the end of the episode. But I think we got to talk about Ernestine a bit, because she's a very, like, funny character, I would say, because she is, like, a complete wild, what's it called?
Like a wild card?
Yeah, maybe, I'm not sure. I mean, she's, like, unpredictable, and it's very hard to understand what she's doing until she says what she's doing. And she's, like, a notary, and it's very funny because she's so invested in finding Angel. It's like, I think she said that they went on a date or something like that, and she thought that he was an actual, like, rich guy, and she wanted to have, like, a relationship with him, but later he appeared to be just a racketeer, and she was so disappointed in him, but also, like, she wants to find him and just to help this widow who entrusted her with actualizing her husband's will. It's such a weird plot, I would say, because does it make a lot of sense? I don't think so.
Yeah, Angel feels like he was supposed to be multiple characters. Like, I feel like the Angel from the beginning of the episode, who is, like, super twitchy and, like, I'm gonna stab ya, like, feels like a very different person from the Angel at the end of the episode who's, like, studying for his dukedom. And the fact that Ernestine went on this date with him seems really, really out of character for, like, the dude at the beginning of the episode who's, like, stabbing a power plant manager, and it makes me wonder if he was actually maybe supposed to be multiple people in the original script, but because it was already too complicated, they how
many more characters can you have?
Yeah, exactly. There were already too many plots in this episode. Yeah. Also, Ernestine, sad widow, OTP.
Yeah.
She is 100% like, she's so invested in this woman's, like, finances. She's just like, I just want her to be happy, and I want her kids to be able to eat. Like, 100% Ernestine is like, I went on a date with Angel, and now I'm a lesbian. So I'm gonna write the first Man from U.N.C.L.E. fanfiction about Ernestine and the nameless widow.
Oh, that's sweet. One thing that really shocked me when I watched this episode before is when she jumps out of the window, and it's like, I guess, like maybe 3 feet from the ground, and she has shoes that have heels, and she jumps out of the window in her shoes with heels, and it just looks painful.
That's how you break an ankle.
Yeah. And like later she calls him Uncle Agent, and they say they. But also, like in this sequence in which Fasik tries to capture Napoleon because he ran away, they have a very fancy fight scene. Like Fasik is on a horse, and he had a saber, and Napoleon jumps for up a staircase and kicks Fasik in the head. It's just so much. It's so extra. It's fun to watch. And as I mentioned once, I think when I was watching the show for the first time, I was very invested in it. But after a short time, I started rewatching the episode in order to make screen caps and gifs and stuff. And on my main watch, I was still on the second season, and I started rewatching season 1 already. And during this episode, there was a scene in which Napoleon hides on like a roof. I sent the picture into the chat.
Oh yeah.
And it was the exact moment when I understood that I actually got invested in Napoleon more than in it.
Oh yeah, it was. I totally understand. It was a really cute scene.
It's adorable.
Like, I actually, when I first saw Napoleon, I thought he was just gonna be like some sort of like smarmy spy womanizer, kind of like James Bond. But then as I watched the show more and more, I realized he's way more complex than that.
And so much weirder.
Yeah.
Napoleon, I feel like actually one of the reasons, like, Napolia, wow, I have oatmeal brain. Napoleon and Ilya work really well as a pair, either as spies or as husbands. Is that they're both weirdos. Like, they're both super eccentric. And, like, they're not immediately recognizable, like, sort of from the outside as being as eccentric as they are, but it's like the farther you get into the series and the, like, more you start to, like, really think about their characters, the more it's like, no, these two very strange men found each other, and that's beautiful.
And when Uncle actually comes to rescue them, Ilya has this very determined look, and he's like, I've got to find Napoleon and save him. It was a very funny scene in which Ernestine actually found Fasik, and she started asking him, like, where is Paddington Smith? And Fasik, he just got kicked in the head, and he got invaded by a lot of agents who also sprayed some kind of gas and like they ruined all his plans to become a king again, and he's just standing there, staring blankly in the distance, and she's asking him, and Ilya sees it, and he just like listens to what she says, and he goes. He goes into the direction that she was supposed to go, because she was actually looking for Napoleon as well, but Ilya was like, okay, I'm gonna do it first.
Yeah. it's very cute.
Yeah.
They're like Ilya is very excited about finding Napoleon, and also does not really want anyone else to be involved in their reunion.
Yep.
And he is prevented from having kind of a cute, like, one-on-one reunion by the fact that, like, oh, we actually never wrapped up the plot, did we?
Gemma appears, and basically Napoleon is like, oh, Gemma.
Yeah.
And Ilya looks so angry.
Okay. Can I confess something?
Yeah.
What? Okay, so Hannah, when you're talking about how like uniform, like fan service isn't really your thing, suit fan service isn't really my thing, but military uniform fan service, I'm a big fan of that. I know there's a lot of issues with the military, but from a pure aesthetic perspective, I find military uniforms, well, not really modern ones, but older ones, to be really cool looking and make someone instantly hot. So, like, this episode definitely had Napoleon uniform fan service in it. So,
Logan, I feel like, considering your love of, like, World War II romance novels, I think I knew that about
you. And, like, the fact that I watched The Man from U.N.C.L.E. because it was a spy show from the 60s, and not because anything else, you could also get it. I like suits. I like coats. I like tuxedos. Police.
I don't know, I feel like the fact that I came to Man from U.N.C.L.E. through Starsky and Hutch tells you enough about my aesthetic sensibilities. Sneakers and jeans, man. Like, I'm now, like, really interested in the idea of, like, I think I need to find some, like, cute 60s fashion that's, like, very casual and draw Ilya and Napoleon in that fashion.
I honestly, I see Napoleon, I see Ilya kind of as having almost like a mod type 60s aesthetic. Like, that's kind of... Like, with his black turtleneck definitely does evoke that, and I think that I can definitely see him having that sort of aesthetic. I think Napoleon would have more of a 60s dad look.
Oh, 100%. Like, the idea of Napoleon wearing, like, jeans and sneakers is like, he would never. But on the other hand, now I want to draw him like that.
But like,
maybe they have to go undercover to the track.
Also, like, if you watch your shows from the 70s, like with Robert One, he looks so funny, to be honest, with longer hair and like wearing colorful turtlenecks. It's something to see.
Longer hair and other flamboyant affectations.
Yeah.
Also, I am seeing now Napoleon as a golf dad in the picture that you just sent. Napoleon is 100% a golf dad, and it's...
Yeah, Napoleon totally would one day just decide to drag Ilya on a golf trip, and Ilya would be all grumbly the whole time.
Golf is a bourgeoisie pursuit. Is golf anyone's turn on? Is there anyone who's like, yeah, I just love seeing a man in a golf outfit?
I don't. I'm sure it's someone's turn on, but I don't think it's very common.
I just love some jodhpurs and tartan.
I don't I know some people watch others like sports for the hot dudes. I've heard people watch hockey for that.
Yeah.
But I think people who watch golf mostly are just other golfers.
People don't watch golf for the sweet, sweet bods.
I'm pretty sure there's a hockey fandom that literally is just about all the hot hockey dudes, and I'm just like, okay.
I'm friends with someone like that.
Also,
sometimes
soccer exists.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My friend who's into hockey sometimes just shows me pictures of random hockey men and is like, aren't they beautiful? And I'm like, they're men who play hockey. I'm also not really into burly, hairy dudes, so that tends to be the hockey aesthetic.
Yeah, not really me either.
Yeah, the only sports that I enjoy watching are maybe figure skating.
Armenian oil wrestling.
No, okay. Figure skating and water sports.
Yeah. Those are the only two sports I am any good at. I'm an okay swimmer and I'm an okay ice skater,
nice.
And every other sport, I die.
Not a bad combination, I would say.
Apparently, I can only do sport if water, either in liquid or frozen form, is involved.
So you are anti-Napoleon.
I am the anti-Napoleon, exactly. That's why I'm the thrush agent who's assigned to torture him. Haven't you seen the episode where I chase him around in an ice skating rink?
Oh my god! I imagine that because I 100% see Napoleon trying to run on the skating rink and falling and crawling on his force.
At the skating rink, Napoleon's the kind of person who clings to the rails on the sides and just inches along.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 100%. I am that person, so I relate.
Ilya would be a good ice skater, and
totally.
Because Ilya also was a gymnast, wasn't he?
Yeah. Supposedly.
Yeah.
I mean, he does the little dance in that episode with the
dress. What number?
The U.N.C.L.E.
The
U.N.C.L.E. one.
Yeah.
He does the little the when you squat and kick.
It's like Russian dance, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And when he does that, he talks about his bum knee from doing gymnastics.
And also, in season 3, he has some scenes in which he does some gymnastic type things words just left my head. I can't speak.
I mean, you may have noticed that 10 seconds ago I said, the one with the Yukon, and then he does that dance where you squat and kick, so clearly words are hard for everyone right now.
And also Napoleon.
But yeah. Napolia. Is that a ship name? Do people say that? Is that like...
Yeah, people... Well, Napolia, that ship name, more is a thing in the 2015 movie fandom.
Yeah.
It's not... I mean, people do use it for the original show, but it's a lot rarer, and it's usually for people who have came from the 2015 movie fandom.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And also, like, I think I pronounced it mentally as Napolia. Not Napolia. Like, it's written like Napo and then L-L-Y-A. I mean, it's a
my rabbit just escaped. I need to go deal with that, because the rabbit is loose. Did she know?
I just hearing her, she goes away from her computer. Yeah, I actually like. I like having a pet rabbit sounds wonderful in theory, but then you have to remember they chew on so much stuff.
The rabbit has been contained.
Okay.
Oh boy.
So
he's not in the walls, though.
You can see why making this episode only about thinking of names was a good idea, because imagine if there was another episode to discuss.
I feel like we would have talked a lot less about, like, hair and Napoleon's golf pants.
No, but still, we took like 20 minutes to only describe the plot. It never happened.
This episode has so much to talk about, but yeah, it's so hard to say what actually happens.
Yeah. As I said, like, this episode had a lot of very funny scenes, but together they are not very coherent.
Yeah, I mean, people might say that about us, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just how we roll.
Yep.
Okay,
So,
I guess
for next week,
I could have talked a little bit about what I wanted to talk about. So basically, we have watched the first 13 episodes, and I mean, actually, we have watched them last week because one of the episodes was shown only later, like in season 1. And so this episode of The King of Names is actually one of the second 13 episodes that were like ordered by the network. And in the first month, the show didn't have very good ratings at all, because it was new and it was like not recognizable by general audience. And after a while, they were faced with possible closing of the show, and basically they sent Robert Vaughn and David McCallum, along with one other guy who was like an organizer, to all the Nielsen cities, and they would go there during weekends, because all 5 days they would shoot episodes for 12 hours a day, and then in the weekends they would go to other cities and like do promotional stuff there. So it was a very wild ride, I would say. And basically, in the end, they succeeded because they appeared on local TV stations, and they would like do funny skits and appeal to the political issues of the region. And also, the guy who was organizing all that, he actually brought with himself an uncle gun, which wasn't actually legal. And he would it was a gun that was how do you say, like you could take it apart and then take it back. I mean, I forget English words. Help me, please.
So wait, it's
Collapsible?
What?
Nah.
I don't think so. Like, was it a prop gun, or
No,
was it like
it was a real gun, but it was taken apart.
Okay, so like it had been disassembled?
Yeah, disassembled, and then they would assemble again, and like mostly David and McCallum would take photos with it and do like beats, and it was his favorite prop, basically. So
Well, it's there.
yeah.
So I'm actually wondering, is there any surviving footage of like the local TV skits?
I don't think so because VHS recorders weren't a big thing back then. Like,
Okay, I just was wondering because like if that did still exist, it would be absolutely wonderful
yeah,
to watch.
it would be absolutely wonderful. But they also like had small summaries of next episodes in the end of episodes, but they also didn't show everything. So basically, the show became very popular among students who lived on campuses, but campuses weren't taken account of by Nielsen, and so nobody knew that students were actually watching the show. And basically, after Christmas, it became a lot more popular because students went back to their homes and like started watching the show with their families. And
Oh, that's brilliant.
yeah,
That's really interesting.
yeah, and basically that's how the show survived. And later it became the most popular show. I mean, a year later. So it was on the brink of being lost that early. And this episode, the first of the episodes that were shot after it was actually like greenlit to be continued. So it's funny.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the next week we will be talking about the Turbuff affair. Or how would you pronounce the name of this episode? Turbuff. Turboof.
I feel like they say it like feel like they say it like three different ways in the episode. If I were thinking about the region of the world that it's in, I would think Terbouf.
Yeah,
But
probably.
I don't think they say it that way in the, in the episode, so who knows?
Yeah. And
It's not a real place, right? Like...
no, it's not, I think. And it's a very fun episode.
Oh no, hold on. Terbouf is a village and former municipality in Fier County, Western Albania.
Oh, wow!
Whoa! How did they know that?
Nice. It's a small place.
Do they have do they know someone from Albania who just was like, well, yeah, Taboof?
Maybe.
Also, I still don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
I mean, they probably just like opened an atlas and looked at the name guide.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I also feel like isn't the Terbouf affair, isn't Terbouf supposed to be a country?
No, it's a place. I mean, it's town.
Okay.
So, I think Logan hasn't seen it yet.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
it just says
I haven't. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
only before starting this podcast, I only had seen 2 episodes of season 1.
Oh, wow.
Terbuff's not one.
Oh
of them.
wow! So you're gonna
Yeah, I
have
just
a
found
very fun time.
the title image that says Terbouf on the Balkan coast. Now, the actual city of Terbouf appears to be landlocked.
Okay.
So, That's very interesting.
But
I would really like to hear it pronounced.
Is there a river or something like that in Turbov?
I know a website where you can look up how it's pronounced. I'm gonna look it up right now.
Oh, nice.
I did that with my students this year when we were talking about the capitals of various Eastern European countries, and I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing Ljubljana correctly, and the website that I clicked on said that it was pronounced Ljubljana. I was like, that's definitely not correct.
Okay, I can say how I would pronounce it in Russian. It's Ljubljana.
Oh, it's not on the website. The website's Forvo. It's a very good website for language learners because people from around the world actually, like, it's like user generated, but people who are native speakers of languages contribute pronunciations of words, and like it's pretty cool. But Tarbouf is not on there, so.
Well, Tarbouf is like a small town, right? It's a village, so I mean, you can't do it with every town in the world. And I would say the name is Ljubljana. Ljubljana. So it's like
yeah, that's pretty close to the... I eventually found a news report that had someone saying it, and I was like, I'm pretty sure this is correct.
I mean, I'm a Russian speaker, so it's like a Slavic language as well, so it's pretty close, I guess. So it will be an episode in which Ilya shows off his wilder side, I would say.
I can't wait.
but still not as wild as Fiddlesticks, because Fiddlesticks is like in my heart for real. But we will get to it later, like a couple of episodes later, I guess. So,
right.
Anything else you would like to add?
I think I'm tapped out on this one.
I think we're good.
If I can end it with one more anecdote from the featurette I watched. Apparently, so Robert Vaughn was working on his thesis, like an actual academic thesis during part of the filming of Man from U.N.C.L.E, and he was quite busy with this. And apparently he would occasionally during takes go into his dressing room, and he put up a sign that said, only come in if you have a very good reason. And apparently David McCallum decided that this was this needed a little spicing up. And so he added to the bottom of his sign, pastry chef required, inquire within.
Oh my god, yesterday somebody on Discord was watching an interview by David McCallum, and apparently he was very anti-leftist, and it was really, I think it was funny because Robert Vaughn was actually writing his thesis on Hollywood blacklisting of communists. Because
yep.
Because he was sympathetic towards people who were leftist, I would say, and he shared some of their ideas in his political views.
Yeah.
So Robert Vaughn was kind of woke, but not 100%, of course, because it was the 60s, and he was
because he was a white man in 1964. Yeah, no, but I thought that was just a cute, it's interesting because the there was the sort of prevailing notion that the two of them didn't really get along on set, which both of them have said repeatedly is untrue.
I mean,
but during the actual 60s, there was a lot of scuttlebutt that they fought, and it actually seems like they were relatively friendly on set.
It's actually a common thing like, what's it called? Press that writes stories.
Like paparazzi or like tabloids.
Tabloids, yeah. Tabloids always write stuff like that because they like wanted to make it look like Robert Vaughn was salty about David McCallum being more popular than him and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they like were nominated for Golden Globes in different years, but basically none of them actually got it because I mean I don't know why, but only the show actually won the Golden Globe, and not one of them. So basically, they were trying to make these sensational stories about them hating each other, but there are no real proofs of it because nobody like actually talked about it this way.
Yeah.
And later when they met up for the reunion movie and like the 18th episode, they seemed on pretty good terms, I would say.
Yeah.
Also, like, Hannah, you're the first person I knew this word because I've read it in a war novel taking place during World War II and the soldiers used it. You're the first person I've ever met who actually used the word scuttlebutt, and I think that's really cool.
I talk like I was born in 1925 sometime.
Yeah, because like I've read that word in a war novel that took place during World War II before, but I've never heard anyone actually use it. So I love that you use that.
I think it's because I was like at least partially raised by my grandparents, and so like I picked up on a lot of sort of like older slang. Like I occasionally will say things to my coworkers like, "Oh, it's going to hell in a handbasket," and they'll all just turn and look at me like, "Are you 70?" I'm a millennial.
Well, that's like, oh, my grandpa says "Holy Toledo," and I'm just like, I've been so tempted to try to bring that back.
Adorable.
I'm just so tempted to start saying "Holy Toledo" in his honor.
I really like that. I think you should. Yeah, it's I to go back to the tabloid issue. As someone who's a big fan of kind of like buddy cop shows in general, it seems like every popular buddy cop, or like in this case buddy spy show of every era has those same rumors, and like 90% of the time the actors are like, "It's not true, we were friends."
Yeah.
But that's how you sell papers.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you sell the papes.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna be born in 1880.
I mean,
all right.
There were so many feuds in the 60s, like, for example, Betty Davis and John Crawford and stuff. And people just wanted it to happen. People were eager to hear about it. So basically, it doesn't sound very true, I would say.
Or like the Brady Bunch. The parents on the Brady Bunch hated each other.
Oh.
I feel like there's like a couple of examples that are like legitimate, and people use those as a way to like be like, "Oh, no actors have ever actually been friends," which is really weird.
But like, I actually don't think that they were really big friends, but at the same time, I think they were just like civil.
Yeah. Well, they actually said something along those lines in the interview. They were like, "We were very comfortable with each other on set, and we got along fine. We just weren't like socially involved."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's like totally fine because like you don't have to hang out with your coworkers.
Yeah, sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. Like,
let's do some gossip. We three actually hate each other.
Yeah.
Don't.
Yeah, we we all hate each other.
Don't ask how 3 people who hate each other and who also live in completely different parts of the globe somehow ended up doing this. It's a complete mystery.
We have to do it.
Yeah, Logan actually stole my previous husband.
I stole your ex that lived in the same dorm as you.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
It's a long story. You don't need to get into it.
Well, and on that note,
Alright. So
we'll see you for the Terboof. I don't even know.
the terrible buff affair.
That's what it should be called. That's the real Man from U.N.C.L.E. title name.
Sounds legit. I think it was another U.N.C.L.E. episode. So brace yourselves.
All right. We are signing off.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.